Welcome to our first in-person Powertalk here at HipHopHuis since the corona rules have relaxed. We are really excited to welcome you into the space. My name is Sakai Makoni and I'm the new Culture and Knowledge Programme Leader here, alongside Philip Powell, who sadly can't make it today as he's currently in Suriname. Together, we're programming events and courses that will sit around our dance classes with a particular focus on Blackness, hip-hop culture and social activism. This summer, I wanted to kick things off with a focus on Black joy after the year that was 2020. I wanted to think about how we could lean into joy despite ongoing struggles. So when I heard that Adreinne Waheed was scheduled to join us through Kip Republic's Free Heri Heri project, it was a perfect fit. Adrienne's work, which you're going to hear more about in a moment, centers Black joy and resistance. A bit about Adreinne. She is a photographer, photo editor, and book author based in Brooklyn, New York, and Berkeley, California, and she has been making images since age 13. Her work has been published by the New York Times, The Fader, The Crisis, Scholastic, and Time Incorporated. She has exhibited at Rush Arts, Breda Photo, and the Corridor Gallery. As a photo editor, she has produced and directed shoots for publications including Vibe, King, and Essence. In 2010, Adreinne created the Waheed Photo Archive, which is an extensive collection of found portraits of the African American community from the Civil War to the present. In 2015, the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture acquired the archive. In 2018, she self-published her photography book, Black Joy and Resistance, with a preface by Jamal Shabazz. We are honoured to have her here today to speak with us about her work and owning her narrative as a Black creative. She'll be interviewed by Kai Wong Loy Singh, who is a creative director at his agency Brand New Guys here in Rotterdam. We have specially selected this audience to centre creatives of colour here in the Netherlands, so there can be an exchange of knowledge and experiences. And we've reserved a nice chunk of time for questions at the end. And we will, of course, have lunch together afterwards. The Powertalk series is all about highlighting and exploring power dynamics in society, especially as they relate to creatives of colour within the cultural sector. We hope that today we will build upon the power talks of the past and expand that canon. We would like to say a big thank you to you for joining us, to Kip Republic for bringing us together, to Operator Radio for capturing today, to our team for their dedication, and mostly thank you to our speakers. Thank you for sharing with us. And now I'll hand it over to Kai.
Here we are.
Yes. Hi.
I'm so excited.
I'm excited. I'm nervous.
It might not seem like it. I'm really calm, but as I whispered in your ear just now, I'm super impressed by your resume.
Thank you.
So if I start fanboying, fanning myself,
no,
just know it's just...
If you start sweating, I'll start sweating.
All right,
so
cool.
Don't do that.
All right, so I think the most important thing is your work is expansive. There's a lot of ground to cover. Mm-hmm. But I think I wrote down a couple of questions which I feel like they should be asked. I think as a Black creative, it's really inspiring to see your work.
Thank you.
And I think it's sort of, you're a trailblazer, right? So what prompted you to focus on Black joy and...
So my work, I've been shooting since I was 13, so that's a long time. And I'm a bit selfish because I shoot for me. I shoot what draws me in. I shoot what I'm attracted to. I shoot what I love. And so, I love Black folks. My favorite subjects are Black folks, and I love to shoot images of us when we are in our joy, when we are in these safe spaces that we create for each other where we can just be ourselves completely. And so when I decided to self-publish the book, I sort of looked at my images that I had been shooting over the previous 10 years, and what they said to me was Black joy. So in a way, the book named itself, the work sort of named itself. I didn't set out beforehand to shoot joy or create this narrative. The joy was there and the narrative was already there. And so in putting together the images, that's the story that they told, was of Black joy and also our resistance too, because sometimes just us trying to live our lives and be joyful is a resistance when you have, powers that be that are trying to oppress us and take us out of our joy.
Yeah, I was. There are some pictures that. There's actually specifically one picture that I'm really curious about the backstory. So when you say that, I love the fact that it's sort of an unfolding story, right? So you've been
Sure.
shooting, and then the sort of the narrative that unfolds is Black joy. But
Yes.
there's one specific picture where I feel like I really want to know what the backstory is behind that one. See, the backstories are for me always the most.
Sure.
The
Is
most
this
fun
the
stuff.
picture here?
No, no, no. There's a slight delay, I think. So this moment,
Yes.
I need more context. Well, what's happening here?
Yes, this was photographed at Afropunk in Brooklyn. And for those that know or don't know about Afropunk, it's a music festival that started in Brooklyn, where it brings together musicians that may not necessarily do just hip hop or just traditional soul music, that do more like rock or punk or, and so this always brings the most incredible, amazing folks. And this brother here was just in the crowd, one of his favorite songs was on, and he's just, having a moment of just happiness, dancing. There are folks dancing around him. And I just was able to catch him in his moment of sheer bliss. And so, that's what it is, Afropunk Brooklyn,
Nice.
circa 2016 or so. But yeah, this is what I enjoy, what I aim for. Well, I'm not aiming for anything, but this type of capture is sort of what is I want my work to resonate with people, and what I kind of want people to get from my work.
Yeah.
It's just like this feeling.
I think we're going to revisit this picture because my inner nerd wants to sort of delve into the technical side of things. But
Sure.
there's something really interesting going on here. So, but okay, so you've experienced Kitikotief here.
Yes.
You've had how many portions of heri did you eat? I maxed out at 7.
I only had one portion of heri before it was all gone.
Okay, yeah,
But when
yeah,
I
yeah.
got home, I thought, oh, I should have had a couple more.
Yeah, we had a
Yeah, it
bar
was
set up, and then
delicious.
people sort of started ignoring the bar and just went in and grabbed one. So
Yeah.
I get that.
It was amazing.
So, but do you see that day, right? Did you
Mm-hmm.
see, well, not specifically that day, but you were here.
Mm-hmm.
But do you see like similar themes when it comes to the narrative that has been unfolding as far as Black joy goes?
Well, I saw that question, before we got here, and I thought I would love to say yes, but so far, this is the most Black people that I've seen. And I mean, Hedi definitely brought a lot of Black folks, and I saw some of that joy, but I would love to see more. So in my personal experience right now, I have not seen enough people of color in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands, but I've only been in Rotterdam for
Yeah, you
30
miss
minutes now.
for the people that been.
And so I think that like today I'm going to be able to see more. There's already so much Black joy here in the room right now, so I think that my narrative will change just after today and this weekend.
Yeah, you need to hang out for a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, when I look around the audience, I see a lot of creativity. Like, all of them are probably creators. What do you think that owning your narrative as a Black creative means? What is it?
Well, owning our narrative is everything. It's key. Because if we don't own our narrative, then who's going to own it? When I'm from the States, obviously, and for a long time, we didn't see ourselves on TV. For a long time, there weren't Black writers and directors. There weren't enough. And so now, with the Issa Raes and those folks of the world, like, people are getting more Black creatives are getting put on in television and film, and we're seeing more stories that are diverse. And so I think that that's key, because if you don't own your narrative, then somebody else will, and 9 times out of 10 they're going to get it wrong. And so you don't want somebody else to tell your story. You want to be able to tell your story, right? And in the past there was so many gatekeepers in between. Like, you couldn't just put your story out there. You had to go to someone else to give the permission. But now, because of the internet, the middleman is sort of being cut out, and you can tell your story directly to the people, and then your audience will come. You'll create your audience. And I think that that's so important, is to be able to, and we're varied, we're all people of color, but we all have different stories. And so there's so much to be told, and there's so much to learn as well from each other and for the world, but we have to continue to create and own that narrative. That's the key.
Yeah. So I love to think in systems as well, but what's the end game of this? So are we in the early stages of people, individuals, creators owning their narratives? Or would you say we're halfway? Or is this already, or have you reached the pinnacle of owning the possibilities of owning your story?
I don't think we've reached the pinnacle at all. I think if there's an end game, it would just be complete equal playing field for everyone, so that there's no sort of hierarchy, there's no sort of gatekeepers, there's no more walls to break down. Everyone has an opportunity. I think that would be the ultimate goal, I would think. And we may be somewhere in the middle of it, somewhere. I think that there are a lot of work has been done to open doors, and so we just have to continue pushing through with authentic stories, with authentic images, and just keep pushing through those doors and knocking down barriers.
Yeah. I really hope I can. I really hope reincarnation is really a thing. I really want to know where this whole thing goes. So during Sakai's intro, she said, and I think I read over it, but she said you started taking pictures when you were 13.
Yes.
So at that moment, I was trying to imagine where I was when I was 13. I was nowhere near a camera, I think. So, but was that whole process of, owning your own story and telling your story, basically, or you already mentioned that you're a selfish photographer. Was that always a key part of your initial start?
Well, having been introduced to photography at such a young age, I think that my I evolved as an artist just as I evolved as a person. So, no, at 13, my only goal was to take pictures of all the cute boys in junior high. That
That's a
was,
book in itself.
yeah. And so I had no concept of anything except that I liked taking photographs. And what it did though was develop me as a portrait photographer, develop my love for portraiture, and also just give me more confidence in myself. I was 13 years old, kind of a shy kid, and the photography gave me a voice, and it gave me confidence within that. And so I would say that it would take years and decades before I really sort of applied any sort of agenda to it or anything like that. And even still now, I really honestly just shoot what I love. I don't go out and approach the day like, oh, I'm going to make sure I say this or I'm going to do that. I just put myself in spaces where I know that there's a good mix or chemistry, that a possibility that I can capture something that I love or something that resonates with me. So I'm drawn towards, again, Black folks, and all that we are, and our beauty and our resilience. And so that sort of like informs me, I suppose, as an artist.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because now I'm going to be the selfish host because you just mentioned something which is really interesting because you don't set out, you don't start the day with an idea of, okay, this is the image I'm looking for, this is what I'm going to shoot. Usually it's sort of a energy that you want to capture,
Sure.
but how specific is it? Because I think, no, that was the question. How specific is it?
Well, I think, of course, there's all types of photography, right? And if I put on my photo editor hat, when I was working for Essence as a photo editor, I would be responsible for hiring other photographers. And, photographers would come with their portfolio, and the ones who concentrated on one or two things that they loved and just shot that over and over, those photographers had really strong portfolios. But the ones who sort of tried to do everything, oh, I shoot food and I shoot people and I shoot buildings and I shoot, it was not focused, right? So I think that each person as an artist, you have to know inside what resonates with you and what you love. And then you'll find yourself there. You'll find yourself in those spaces and in those situations. I personally love photojournalism as well as shooting people and street photography. So it's sort of instinctual when I go out. If the lighting is right, if I see an interesting person, if there's some interesting shadows or things happening, I could see something here and see a person and walking this way and know by the time they get here, it's going to be a perfect photograph, right? But that's just from years of doing it and following sort of an instinct,
Yeah.
and a timing. And I don't know if I answered your question, but
Well, in a way you did. I love the way that you just mentioned the word instinct because sometimes that word feels like a sort of a magical gift you can have, but it's just something that develops over years. You develop your instincts. It's sort of I guess there's a spiritual side to it as well, but it takes years and years of effort. So translating all that experience to your professional work, like you just mentioned Essence, like as a photo editor, would it be how would you say that your specific point of view translates over to your work for a professional for a company like Essence?
well, when when you're working for a company, you obviously you're working for them under their umbrella. So you would hope that they hired you because of they like your perspective, but at the same time, you know that you have bosses and people that you have to please, right? So I think I was fortunate to be able to work in Black spaces. You know, Essence was pretty much my first job out of college, and so you know I'm right out of college, and I end up at this Black woman's magazine, and it was sort of like the best. It was like a utopia at that time because the Blackness and women, it was all reinforced for me, you know, to be able to be in this space where all these amazing women who are writers and editors and creatives. And so I'd like to think that each person adds something to that team. But at the end of the day, sometimes it was still just a job where you have bad managers, where you have, you know, people getting on your nerves and coworkers and things like that. And again, I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, see, here's the thing. Like, you seem like an artist with a really specific point of view, and like, well, you mentioned bad managers. I can imagine a sort of clash in points of view, right?
Well, you know, again, we are all ever evolving, growing people, right? So my 40-something-year-old self is a bit different from maybe my 30-something-year-old self. And when I first got to Essence in my 20s, you know, I mean, I was just a sponge soaking up everything. And so I wouldn't say that I was this super opinionated person. I was learning, you know. At this point, sure, I have opinions about things. And so maybe I would be different in that position now.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say, you know.
Would you be open to becoming a photo editor again at this stage in your life?
I would, if the situation was right and if it was a worthwhile cause and a worthwhile position, then I would be open to it. But I don't see myself in anything that at this point long term, because I feel like I'm in a space now where I want to create work, the type of work that I want to create. And I don't want to have to, you know, ask anyone's permission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I promised. So when HipHopHuis asked me to moderate this talk, I had this stream of conscious moment where I was just scribbling down stuff based on your work,
Right.
and based on what I saw. And I think I sent the raw version to you, and you were like, "Oh, the hell is this?" So my apologies for my stream of thought,
Okay.
but there was just a lot of stuff happening. So, like, on a meta level, I think we should just ignore everybody in the crowd and it's just us two here talking. But these are the things that I really, really want to know, because I once had this idea, and I wrote that down as well, where I felt like the narratives in the public space about our community were extremely limited. So I had this idea, like, that was when I worked at agencies, to set up this huge media buying campaign and not sell a product, but just portray images of of different experiences, different narratives. And that's basically what you've been doing, but unconsciously and then consciously. So, but then there's this conundrum where it's like you're aware of the work you can put out, which sort of changes this whole the way people are perceived, the way the dynamics between people in a specific community work.
Sure.
So when you set out to produce something now, do you sort of ignore the fact that that your work is probably going to be impactful? Are you aware of the impact of your work when you're producing?
Right. So we were talking before the talk, and we were talking about authenticity, right? And I think that it's definitely important for us to, when we go back to controlling the narrative, it's definitely important for us to create images that change any stereotype or any negative narratives. Or, when I first started at Essence, and this was in the late 90s, there was no, if we wanted to do a story about Black women healthcare or Black women in doing yoga, there were no images of just regular images of Black folks, like of Black family cooking or Black family jogging or, Black women exercising. There weren't those images. And so we had to hire people to create those images. So on the one hand, that was necessary because obviously we do all of those things and there needs to be representation there. But I think that what you are more asking is, like, say for instance with Black Joy, in my mind, it's not something that you can just set up and, decide to, I'm going to go out and I'm going to create some Black. You can, but the authenticity is not going to be there. That's not what I do. I don't go and create the joy. I just capture the joy. I just put myself in the middle of it, and that's about intuition, instinct, timing. It's about a feeling more so.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's important for photographers to be authentic and true to themselves, no matter what you're capturing. And if you're true to yourself and if you love that subject, then that is what's going to shine through. And that's sort of what it kind of, I think what resonates in my work is just that sort of authenticity. But, it's not for a corporation or a company to go and recreate or sort of try to co-opt and sell and brand. It's,
But it happens though.
Of course it does.
And maybe even inspired by your work.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe.
it's I think it's just me wondering if that's a responsibility as a creator. Should you carry that responsibility? Is that something?
I don't feel that it is a creator's responsibility to do. I think that the society and the world should just be more equitable and equal and accepting of all cultures. And if we can change sort of that dynamic, then people should be able to create whatever they want to create and not have a responsibility of, I have to, change the narrative of my people. I mean, that shouldn't be an artist's responsibility.
Okay, so would you say that your work is because if somebody commissions you as a photographer based on the work you've thus far created, what are your parameters for what's the space that you want to work in? What will you say to somebody who commissions you for the type of work you've been making?
Well, if you're commissioning me for the work, then you just have to let me make it, I mean, sometimes, and I really haven't been in this position, but being a photo editor, I've seen it where, you hire a photographer because you like their work, but then you micromanage them and try to get them to create something else. And that's sort of, that comes in conflict. It's not allowing the creative person room to do what it is that you actually like in their work. You have to give them space to do it.
Yeah. I was asking, and this was a curveball I threw. So I was like, okay, maybe um, you have specific boundaries that you wanna that have to stay intact in order for you to do certain work. Because I
Right.
feel that authenticity is.
Well, I mean, I try to be pretty easygoing and sort of, this is like my first book, and the last couple of years I've been sort of on this whole Black Joy tour, but I'm pretty easygoing. But I have worked with photographers who, in order to control their images, they have very strict parameters of what they can do and what they can't do. Even I can only use natural light, and I'm only going to shoot from 9 a.m. to like noon, and just all sorts of things to try. And I understand it, although it can be difficult. People can be difficult, but I understand sort of wanting to create the most optimal space for you to be creative. But I personally haven't like really required any of those type of things. I'm still really going with the flow, and I can't see myself being, I try to, one of the things that I think is one of my gifts, I would say, is to be able to create on the spot anywhere. Like, it's almost like a personal challenge that I have to myself, to where it's like, okay, you put me in a space, where's the light? Where can I get a good shot? How, and so that's sort of like my challenge to myself.
Did it happen when you walked in here?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Nice windows, natural light.
Just
Yeah.
kind of check the whole vibe out and say, okay, I can get a good shot here, here, here. Yes.
Okay, so I know you also collect images.
Yes, I do.
So I have a difficult relationship with creating mood boards and being inspired by work. Like sometimes I delete Instagram, throw out my laptop, and then just go sit in a cave and then trying to think of what it should be.
Okay, yeah.
But that's just me being a little bit weak-minded, maybe. What's the dynamic between your own work and the images you collect? Like, is there an interplay?
So I collect old images of Black folks, and I've been doing that since 2010, and it's in the form of like going to antique shops or garage sales or on eBay, and I collect images of Black people from the Civil War to like up to like the 80s. And it's really just my love of Black folks that drew me to it. That's it. I love collecting things. I like old things, and I love the way that back when photography was really expensive to do, folks would get all dressed up and stuff just to have their portrait taken, and so I love that. And I just really started collecting images out of that love. And then also because, I was in Washington, D.C. one time, like 10 years ago or so. And, when the marshals will come and evict people out of their houses and then throw all of their stuff like on the sidewalk. And I mean, they don't do it everywhere, but in DC they do it, and it's terrible, right? And you have people's belongings out on the sidewalk. And I was passing by a street and I saw just all of this stuff just piled outside of
Crazy.
and there was like photo album. It was a Black family, and it was a photo album just tossed out on the ground, and it just hurt my heart. And so I just couldn't leave it just tossed for the garbage man to pick up. And so I took that album, and for me it was just kind of like, when I'm looking through it, it reminds me of my grandmother's photo album, and that's really how I started collecting these images, because, these images from our grandparents' photo albums, our great grandparents, collectively, then they tell a story. They tell a story from the perspective of our elders and of our ancestors. These snapshots that are in these photo albums, with either the former portraits, the snapshots, all of that, right? And so I started to just sort of save these images, save them from the landfill, and I didn't know what I was going to do with them, and they ended up being acquired by the African American Museum of History and Culture. But to answer your question, I don't necessarily think that they have influenced my photography. It's all one big pot of gumbo. It's all about the love and the beauty of Black folks. That's really what it is.
Yeah, that seems like the sort of theme.
That
in
is
this.
the theme through. I do portraiture, and that's what it's about. That's how I'm inspired.
Yeah, so it's the idea that somebody would throw away my family portraits. That's insane. Recently, little fact, I shot somebody took a picture of me. Actually, it's Marwan. Is he here? There's a picture of me, my son, my dad, and my grandfather. So it's like 4 generations.
Yes.
And just the idea of somebody just tossing that in the street is just...
Yeah, it's kind of
crazy to
crazy. Yep. Yeah, I started collecting them before my grandma passed, but when she passed away in 2015, I inherited like 15 albums, and I just thought, what if these ended up on the streets? Like, I would be insane, And so over the years of me scanning some of the photos and posting them, I've had people contact me to say, hey, I was adopted. This might be my birth family. And what I will do is, when people contact me, I give them all the information that I have about the photo album. There could be captions on the back. There could be, where the photo album came from, where I got it from. I'll give them all that information to try to help them on their quest to, find their family and things like that. So...
Okay, so again, looking around in the crowd, I'm just curious what, and I almost sort of know the answer already.
Uh-oh.
But I'm gonna ask anyway.
Okay.
What's the you found your space, you find your sweet spot within what you do. What's advice that you would give to creators, the new creators, the next generation coming up?
Yeah, my advice, and it might sound basic, but it's to always follow your passion and stay true to yourself, right? And never look to someone else to tell you that your work or yourself is valuable. Like, never look for validation in someone else, right? For my book, I self-published it, and self-publishing was about controlling my narrative, and also not having to look to a publisher, a lot of times, a white man, to validate me, to tell me that my work is good enough to publish, not look to anybody else, and sort of make that investment in myself. So as Black creatives, make the investment in yourself, even if you can't necessarily see what the end goal is. Always make that investment in yourself, when before I published my book, I had some friends, some photographer friends who published a book called Mfon. And it is a sort of encyclopedia of Black women photographers. And there's like at least 500 Black women photographers in this book. But before, and they self-published the book, but before they self-published, they went to all of the popular publishing houses in the States. And every single one of them was like, oh no, that's not gonna sell, or I don't even believe that there's that many Black women photographers. Is there really that many Black women photographers? All these things they were saying to them and discouraging them. And they didn't quit. They decided to do it themselves. And that book ended up being, a bestseller. And so from their example, I just chose to not even go to try to sell my book to some publishing house and just do it myself. And so, that was a lesson I learned from them. And I want to continue to pass that on. We have resources in our community where we can pull together and we can, put our own products out there. And, it's okay to say my product is for us and it's by us. That doesn't mean anybody else can't enjoy it, but I made it for us. So,
yeah, I think it's really interesting to see your love for physical products as well. Because would you say in this day and age, would you say that digital publishing holds more or less weight than publishing a physical book?
Well, I'm an old head, and so I value, and I was in magazines too, in book publishing, so I value the physical, but I recognize that we're now in a digital world. I think that there's gonna always be value in having like a physical book or a physical, because really a digital could just zap and be gone. We don't know. Sometimes when I'm handling my digital images on putting them on these drives, I'm like, well, what if this drive just zaps out? Like all of my stuff is gone.
There's some people here in the crowd who this has happened to. So
I'm sure.
And it's a lot of tears. A lot
of tears. So I think there are always going to be value to that physical image.
Okay, so at first I was like, okay, an hour, that's that's long. But now I want to go on for 4 more. But we need to leave room for some audience questions as well. Hey, Brandon. So yeah, I feel there's room for some audience questions still.
Sure. Can you click on another image?
Yeah,
maybe?
for sure. So what I'll do is I'll pick somebody and then Sakai will hand over the mic. Oh, there you go. She's standing right behind you.
Hi. Well, I'm just really curious about more your work, how it evolved, like when you were 13 and like you said, like in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s.
Sure.
What drove you to kind of stay in photojournalism and how did that kind of evolve? I want to know more about your work.
Sure. I consider myself lucky to have found something that I love at a young age, right? So at 13, when I got introduced to photography, I just loved it so much and I never put it down. So I worked in all aspects of photography, from assisting weddings and developing film in one of those 24-hour labs, all types of stuff. But that passion never died. There was a long period of time when I was working at Essence and Vibe, when I was photo editing, that I wasn't really shooting a lot. I was only like shooting for myself, but I wasn't shooting a lot of volume of stuff. And so I think there was a lull for maybe a good 10 years. And then I just kind of started shooting more again. So, I guess it was just a passion that never died. I still shoot some of the same things, a lot of the same things that I shot when I was younger, and so I'm pretty much like I don't want to say a one-trick pony, but I pretty much am consistent in what I've been doing for all of these years. And so in terms of the work evolving, I guess the more you grow, the more you're exposed to in general, then you evolve and your work evolves as well. I moved into a space now where I'm wanting to intentionally create work that I want to get my Gordon Parks on. Like, I want to be able to be on that type of a level where I'm creating work that's resonating, that could be in museums, but it's also, has a photojournalist type of a feel to it as well. So I don't know if I answered your question. Yeah.
Adreinne, you documented specifically during the pandemic a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests.
Yes.
And I'm also interested. So I want to ask you if you can share a little bit about that experience. But I'm also interested in your experience in South Africa, the Fees Must Fall protests that happened. Can you share a little bit about those experiences?
Yes. So first I'll talk about the Fees Must Fall protest in 2015. I just happened to be visiting Johannesburg. It was my first time there. And there was the students protesting. They marched out of their classrooms and they were protesting the tuition hikes. And just me being, a photographer and who I am, I'm like, wait a minute, there's some protests happening. I need to be there. I need to go. And so I ended up being there and marching through the streets with them and for a couple of days and covering the Fees Must Fall. And so this was before my book. And that experience actually influenced my book as well and sort of the name, because as we were protesting, marching through the streets of Johannesburg, there was drums, there was dancing, there was chanting. And so it was resistance, but there was also joy in it. And I find that Black folks, we can find that joy even in resistance, because it's often like such a thin line between the two. And so fast forward to the pandemic in 2020, we were all in lockdown, and then the George Floyd murder happened, and, people took to the streets. And prior to that time, I was in, quarantine and kind of going stir crazy. But the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, it just kind of drew me out into the streets. Prior to that, I hadn't really been very political too much. I have friends that go to marches all the time, and I'm like, yeah, you guys go do that. I'll be at the house when you get back. But I was just compelled because the frustration, the anger, all of these feelings I was feeling about just constantly seeing so much police brutality in the U.S. And then, I'm from Oakland, California, and so I've seen this from a young age. And it just kind of sparked something in me over 2020, and I just had to be out there. And I ended up going to over 50 protests, New York, D.C., Atlanta, but mostly New York. And it was actually soothing for my soul to be out there. I didn't know that I needed it, because not only was I documenting, but I was also raising my voice. I was also screaming and yelling and chanting as well. And so it was like, activism as well as, documenting. So I guess in that way, a friend of mine has this phrase, like, we're visual activists. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm a visual activist, And so, it was just very important to be out there. And what was so encouraging was all of the young people that were leading the marches. There was I followed several groups in New York. The Warriors in the Garden was one of them, and the Freedom March NYC. And these are led by young women of color. And so it was very inspiring to see the next generation as well leading us, through this whole situation. So, yeah, the last image that you saw that was on the well, this is in South Africa, actually at the Fees Must Fall protest. But a lot of these other ones were from, well, that's Afropunk in South Africa. Yes, this one here is from the protests of 2020. And you have Queen Jean, who's a trans woman activist, and some of the other ladies from Freedom March. And this is when we took over the FDR, which is a major freeway in New York. And so, yes, this is what we were, doing just out there the entire pandemic almost. It felt like just causing good trouble.
Are the process photos also in the book?
Oh, hold on. No, but you need to repeat it for the...
So the book was published before 2020. It came out in 2019, in January of 2019. So the protests that are in the book are the Fees Must Fall, and then also I shot the Million Man March anniversary in Washington, D.C., where the mothers of the of children that were killed by the police, they all gathered on the steps of the Capitol. And so I photographed that as well. That's in the book as well.
And do you have plans to do something with the Black Lives Matter protest, the photos, new book, Black Resistance? Or
There's definitely a body of work there, and I'm open to what could become of it. But at the moment, I don't have any specific plans with it. Not yet. Thank you.
Hi, Adreinne. So my list of questions are long, but something specific that I'm thinking about is when you began, and the question around, did you see this Black joy in the Netherlands and through your experience? And so I know you've been shooting.
Yes.
This whole time you're here. And I have two questions. One is, what did you see now through the lens of the camera? Where did you see resistance, joy, Blackness celebrated? And so that's one question. And then the other is, it's, when you told a story about the eviction and how vivid that was, I'm from New York, I'm an American, very vivid makes a lot of sense to me. But I do think here that's, I don't know that I would see that level, and definitely not at that height, that much. And I often feel like there's so much opportunity to push the envelope around what art can look like as a Black person. There's you have the space in a different way. And I wonder what your message is and what you see as could be possible in a place like the Netherlands around pushing Black art and this kind of joy, Black joy and resistance. There's something in joy that is a passion that I too, where does that live in the Netherlands and how do you cultivate it?
Sure.
And I'm just wondering, as someone looking, what do you see?
Right. So I feel like I'm so brand new here that I don't necessarily have a place to speak about that. But, at the dinner the other night where you were saying that you felt like there was more openness in the Netherlands by, I don't know, I guess the powers that be to listen or to be open to trying new programs or giving green lights to new programs, whereas you said in the States there would be more red tape. So that's something that I wouldn't necessarily know for here because I haven't been here and I don't know how all of that works. But if that is true, that there's that sort of the powers that be, and whether it's their white guilt or whatever it is, if they're more open to to Black programming, to narratives, to putting more Black people on, then that's great. I don't know specifically, but in terms of Black joy, the Free Hetty Hetty event was my Black joy of what I've seen so far since I've been here. And it was wonderful to see. In particular, what resonated were the elders and the kids. For some reason, that's where, and maybe it's that like elders and kids can tap into sort of, I don't know, it's like almost like, especially the kids, they can tap into the joy easily, right? And then the elders seem to be so excited and happy about the holiday and the Free Hetty Hetty. And so that particular joy just felt so authentic and real. And so that is what resonated with me, So I was really happy to be able to see that. It's hard for me to say, with all you guys looking at me like, well, the Netherlands should do this or that. I honestly, I don't know, all of you that are creative here, it seems like there's so much opportunity, for you all to like just think tanks and to come together, and just like the event and how all of the people came together to make the Free Hetty Hetty event. It seems like there should be or would be room for other events and cultural events. Like you all maybe opened the door, and now there should be like more things that, maybe modeled similarly, more events that could maybe come about, or, whether it's residencies or events or just things to promote Blackness and Black joy. Just the doors open, so just like keep pushing is what I would say.
I have the mic.
Hey.
Adreinne,
Hi.
I want to ask a question, but I also wanted to say, you mentioned Gordon Parks,
Yes.
one of my favorite photographers who I studied a lot of his work, where I think your work, for me, what intrigues me the most is that the joy is the resistance. And as I'm in studying and having studied Gordon Parks' work, the pain was often the resistance. And I feel like when you mentioned him and you said, I want to be like Gordon Parks, and I was like, no, you are. Like, you are.
Oh, man, that's a
for
big
me, at
shoes
least,
to fill.
And talking about being a visual activist, I have like all his books, and I was very proud to put your book next to his book, because I do think that if anything, he created that work for your generation to create a new visual of what resistance in the Black community looks like.
Yes.
So I think he would be proud, and I think you do stand on the shoulders of him. And the question I wanted to ask is, you mentioned at 13 you was introduced. Was it someone that introduced you, or
Yeah, my
how
father.
did you get your father?
Yeah, my father had a
curious.
camera. It was a Pentax K1000, I think it was. And he wasn't using it. It was in a dusty case. And then I took it out, and I'm like,
Because it was a Pentax.
I took it out, and I'm fooling around with it, and I'm like, you don't use this. He says, yeah, you can have it. And that was it. I just began shooting. I had a best friend who was really talkative and loud, and I was kind of shy, but we would go around to all the guys. She let us take your picture, And then I was spending all my allowance on film and developing, because, it was no digital back then. So it was like film. And then I got to be known as like, the girl with the camera. So now all of the guys are like, come take my picture after that, And so I have portfolios of all of them, But yeah, that's how it began. And then when I went to high school was when I was able to take my first photography class. And that was really important too, because my photography teacher, who I'm still close with today, Miss B, she encouraged me, that was where I learned how to develop film and also to print in the darkroom. And she would actually let me cut my other classes to be in her class. So I would cut like gym and econ, and I would be in her class for like the morning until the afternoon. And so, that was really important in my development too. It's important to get good feedback and get encouragement, as a child. And just, a lot of Black American families, at least then, they didn't understand art. So my family was like, that's not a major. Like, art's not a major. You have to do something else, And so it was good to be able to go to school and have some reinforcement there, And my uncle, who told me that art wasn't a major and that photography wasn't a major and was going to get me anywhere. And then when I got hired at Essence Magazine, I called him up and I said, "You remember?" And he didn't remember. He's like, "I didn't say that." I'm like, "Yeah, okay."
Do we have room for one more? There in the back.
Hi. Thank you for your story. It's really great to hear. You already told us a bit about your development, but I was wondering if there are any experiments that you are working on now or would like to work on, whether it's, I don't know, paper you want to print on or other materials or moving image.
Yeah, actually, I got this fellowship at the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts. It was a printmaking fellowship. And I learned to do lithographs, etching, lino cut printing, basically relief printing, right? And this sort of just opened up my world because there's a series of work that I'm working on, and it's not photography. It's actually for printmaking. It's diving into the history of housing discrimination in the U.S., redlining. And so before the printmaking fellowship, I had these ideas, but I didn't know how to implement them. I didn't know how to do it. And so once I learned how to do screen printing and relief printing, it was allowed me to be able to express myself in a whole different medium. And I'm able to bring photography into it as well through the photolitho process. And so it's sort of similar to old school photography, the photolitho process, except you're printing on these metal plates, and that's sort of almost like your negative. And then you use the metal plates and you actually put ink on it and paper on top and then roll it through the press. And so I've been doing a lot of that recently, and I have a group show that's up right now at the Elizabeth Foundation for the Art. It's a women in printmaking show where I'm incorporating all of those things, the photolitho, the lino cut, and the relief printing and stuff. So I'm excited about that, but it's sort of new. It's a new medium for me, so I'm still working it out.
I'm looking for hands, but I think, oh, there we go.
Hey.
You already told us about Miss P and how important it was for you to have a teacher who encouraged you.
Yes.
I'm a teacher as well.
Awesome.
And I have mixed classes. And I wonder what you think is necessarily for a teacher to it's necessary for a teacher to teach or like skills to give to your students. Like how can I encourage them to own their narratives?
Right. Yeah, I know that teachers have a lot on their plates, right? And so it's difficult to try to add more. But I imagine that as a teacher, you have a relationship with your students to where you know what their gifts are, possibly, you know what students are good at or what they might need help in. And so I just imagine as a teacher, when you have all of these young people and you see something in someone, just encourage it. Encourage, like if one of your students takes a liking to art or something else, if you can just kind of encourage that in them. And I guess it's a case-by-case basis, because some kids might get encouragement and feedback at home and some may not. And I don't know if as a teacher you know that or not, which ones have more home, reinforcement. And so maybe, part of a teacher's sort of job is to be that extra encouragement for students, that extra support system for them, right? And so I would just say, if you can, really study your kids and to be able to know who needs help in what areas, who might just need a little bit of encouragement, and that can go a long way. And expose them maybe to, expose them to as much as possible in terms of, art and travel and the world, I would say. I know you already have so much to do as a teacher. Yeah.
Any more questions? Oh, there we
go. I was curious to know if you are part of like a collective, or do you? Because it's important also to sort of find people that get you or what you try to do.
Right.
Or do you work by yourself or?
So, I mostly work by myself, but ever since the MFON book, and it's spelled MFON, it was a collection of Black women photographers. So ever since that book came out in 2018, I think, or 2017, we have been sort of this loose collective of Black women photographers. So we may meet up online or encourage each other through Instagram posts or Facebook posts or stuff like that. Or sometimes we are all invited to do group shows together. So the same collective of women got invited to the African American Museum in Philadelphia to do a group show together. So that was an opportunity for us to commune together and get together again and stuff like that. So it's sort of an unofficial collective, but it's not an official collective. I'm sure there are collectives out there. I'm just the type of person that's always kind of been do my own thing, So I'm kind of like a loner in that way, I suppose. But I think that those collectives can be important for people, because fellowship and sisterhood and all of those things are always good, I feel like, especially for people of color, because we need that support. Yeah.
Oh, there's another one behind you.
Hi.
I was wondering, because you shared your story about your friend asking the cute boys for permission to take their pictures. Yeah. But how do you go about photographing people now, like in huge crowds, and afterwards, like sharing their images? Yes. Do you get awkward about it, or you just go and shoot and...
Well, there's like such a fine line with that, and it's changed. Attitudes about having your photo taken have changed over the years, especially now with digital. You could Photoshop people and, just change their head on, put it on a different body and all those things. And people are more skeptical of photography. And so I would say that, like, for me, it's like this kind of dance I do where it's a lot of times it's about energy, right? Because when you're photographing someone, you for me, it's all about energy. I'm feeling their energy, before I'm even photographing them. And so I try to get a yes, like even if it's a nonverbal yes, it's like if you connect eyes with somebody, or you do a nod, or you smile and they smile, or from something like that all the way to the just straight out asking them. And there'll be some people that say, no, I don't want my photograph taken, and I'm just like, okay, respect, and I keep it moving. But it is a fine line, and a lot of times the images that I've taken where it's been like group settings and event spaces, there's like, and I don't know what your laws here are, but there's sort of like this law in the States where if you're in a public space, a group setting, then you're granting your permission to, if you're in a space that has recording going on and it's a group space, then by entering that space, you are granting your permission to have your likeness taken. So that's sort of like very loose. I'm sure if somebody really decided to press you on it or try to sue you, they could. I think the right thing to do is to have or the responsible thing to do is to have maybe photo releases or something available for your subject so that you don't have to follow up with that later on. But I just find that breaks up it breaks the mood up and it breaks the vibe up sometimes. It's like you want to capture something in the moment, and sometimes if you ask, it's already too late, that the moment has passed. So yeah, and then it's more posed. And so it's just really, it's just really about kind of a trial and error in that way. And even for my book, there are some people that I asked beforehand, and got permission, but then there were some people that I had to get permission from afterwards, and I was just happy that they were okay with it. Some people, they see it in the book and they're like, oh my God, this is so great. Luckily, nobody has said, oh, I hate this. Why did you do this? But I remember there's a whole section in my book called Afropunk, and before the book came out, my producer and I were really happy about it, and we thought, oh, we're going to send this to Afropunk and they'll love it. And we sent it to them, and they did not love it. And they were like, one woman in particular that was the head of it, but I won't mention her name. She's not the head of it anymore.
Easy to Google.
But she was very mean and nasty about it. And she was basically like, you don't have permission to use our name. You don't have permission to use the Afropunk name in the book. And I was like so confused because I'm like, but I come from a magazine where I shot the thing at Afropunk, so I should be able to say that I shot the thing at Afropunk. I'm like, no, you can't use our name. Anyway, because of that drama, it made me have to go back because she scared me so bad that I had to go back in every single person in that section. I had to go and try to find them. Because a lot of times I tag them on Instagram, and so I try to go back and find everybody just to make sure that I had their permission, just to cover myself. So, you don't want to have to do that if you can help it. Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking that you were going to answer the question with telling what you told us, how to capture the moment. And you told us about the demonstration that you were chanting and protesting and demonstrating alongside while making pictures.
Yes.
So you're not like the neutral observant, but you're part of the story itself.
Yes.
So for me, that would be different. If you then would take my picture, you're not, taking my picture.
Right.
You're with me in this picture. So
yes. And so it was interesting being out in the Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd protests, and because there was a lot of attention on that story. So there was a lot of news people there, and there were a lot of like white photographers there, you know, white male photographers there, taking up way too much space, you know, and so, you know, that was tough. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of times it's about your energy, right? And so, yes, I was there. I was chanting. There were times where I was like not even shooting because I was too busy, like, you know. And so when other folks see, you're right, when they see me participating, then their armor comes down because they don't feel like I'm just there to capture their image and then go make money off of it. And there were plenty of photographers that were there to do that. And I was telling a photographer friend, like, I'm sure the books will be coming soon from all of the white photographers that were all there capturing the movie. And they'll be the ones that are all in the way and, you know, elbowing people and jumping in front of people. And, you know, there's a etiquette that you should have, that photographers know photo etiquette, you know, and whether or not you decide to adhere to that is on you. But people feel your energy and they feel your intention.
Can I add on to that? Because that's actually a really, really good point. Because do you feel like sometimes you need to let go of that? Will you never let go of that etiquette to get that shot? Because instinctively you feel like...
Well, I mean, sometimes you do. Sometimes you gotta let go of the etiquette to get... Like, during the Black Lives Matter, there was this one particular photographer, this white woman, right? She did not adhere to the etiquette at all. She's always in front of people, you know, just blocking everybody, jumping in front of... But you know what? At the end of the day, her shots were fire, right? And so I would come back and I would look at her stuff on Instagram, and then I would look at mine, and her head would be in my picture. Well, she's got the shot, and I got the shot with her head in it. And so, you know, sometimes you're just like, I just gotta do it. Like, if I'm either gonna get this great shot or I'm gonna be nice and I'm gonna miss it. So sometimes you gotta step on some toes sometimes to get it. But, you know, you still try to have some grace about it, you know. So when I've done that, I've tried to apologize later after I got the shot. But yeah, sometimes it's the bulldogs that get the shot. So you just kind of have to have some sort of balance with it.
I think we have one more question in the back, yeah.
Adreinne, thank you, first of all, for being with us here today.
Thank
and
you.
For all your insights. So my question is the final question. I want to make it a good one. Everybody's looking at me. So you've also been talking, and a lot of people have been asking about the archive. And I've been thinking about the archive a lot recently, you know, past, present, future.
Yes.
And what we feed back into that archive as Black makers or mixed makers or makers of color.
Yes.
And I think my biggest question right now, because I was also looking at the work of Khalil Joseph, who also works with a lot of archival work, Jenna Kiru, Arthur Jaifa, you know, all of these giants. And I was wondering, because the story you talked about in Washington, where you find that archive and you also sold that archive, how do you deal with the ethics of working with other people's material, essentially, because it's someone else's material.
Sure.
And making sure that they're represented correctly in those archives and who they're represented by.
Right.
And also what happens to the material and how does it feel to, how do I say this correctly? To basically, I'm not going to say take someone else's work, but to have volition over someone else's work and be able to give that to an institute. How do you deal with that ethically? That's my question.
Sure. Yeah, you got me a doozy for the last question. So the Smithsonian, I donated to them. I didn't sell it to them. Okay, so I didn't make money off of these people's images, but I think that the way I think about it is that I saved these images. I'm preserving these images. I saved them from the landfill, and now they are in a place where they can be preserved and they can be held with a certain amount of respect. The Smithsonian has the temperature controlled rooms, and they have all of the state-of-the-art high-tech archival things to deal with those images. And so I think that, when we're talking about our memories, our elders' memories, we hold those dear. And I had to think about what is the best way to honor those, right? And when I think about honoring, our images, or like maybe I think about what my grandmother would have wanted for her images. Sure, she would want them held at the Smithsonian, and so there's always this sort of fine line. And you mentioned Khalil Joseph, who's a friend of mine, and his mom is a good friend of mine, and we've had these conversations about the archive, and she's actually schooled me about it as well, to say that these aren't your images, and she's right. They're not. And so she once asked me, well, why would you name it the Waheed Photo Archive? These are not your images. Sure, but I named it the Waheed Photo Archive so that they would all have a place and a house to be gathered in, because they were just thrown and strewn out everywhere. So this is just one place where people can know that they can come to and see these amazing archival historic images, and in that way, that's why I put my name on it. But I understand that they aren't mine. But I feel like collectively they are all of ours, because collectively they are a visual history of, in this particular case, Black Americans, a visual history of our story, And so I understand the sort of dilemma there, but the only thing that I can do is, it's about intention, right? And so the only thing that I can do is just be happy, or know that my intention is pure in this collection of this work, and try to make sure that my decisions that I make regarding the archive are always going to be from that love, that place of love for Black people. Welcome.
That was an incredible last question. My heart stopped for a second. I think that wraps up our Power Talk.
Okay.
Adreinne, I want to thank you for sharing your insights,
thank you.
Being so open.
Yes.
I want to thank the audience for coming in these crazy times. And I think we have a small gathering upstairs still after this. So
can we get like a picture in front of this, like Black Joy and Resistance?
Like
awesome.
A group picture.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Thank you. Thank you.